Alright, welcome back to Human-Centered Technology. I'm Mark, and with me as always is the brilliant Jenny.
Hey everyone, happy to be here. Ready to dive into some tech mysteries with you, Mark?
Oh man, mystery's right. Because there's some new info out there that's kinda unsettling in the cybersecurity world. It's about how well our fancy endpoint security is actually doing.
Ominous. Fancy endpoint security. You mean like the antivirus and the EDR? The endpoint detection and response tools companies spend big money on?
Exactly. The stuff we all rely on to be the digital bouncer at the door of our computers and networks. But according to research from SpyCloud, these tools are missing 2/3 of malware infections. 66%!
Okay, wait, let me get this straight. Companies are investing heavily in these solutions. They feel like they have a handle on endpoint security, and you're saying 2 out of 3 times the malware just slips right past?
Pretty much. It's kinda like having a state-of-the-art alarm system on your house, but 2/3 of the time, the burglar just waltzes in through the front door because they know exactly where the blind spots are.
That is not ideal. And what time's getting through? Are we talking about just minor annoyances or the really nasty stuff?
Oh man, this is the fascinating part. Well, not fascinating times good, but fascinating from a technical perspective because it's so clever. Mostly it's infostealers. These are specialized pieces of malware designed specifically to grab sensitive data automatically after they infect a machine. They don't just mess with your files, they are looking for information.
Infostealers. Okay, so not just messing up your files, but specifically looking for information? Like passwords and...
Passwords, yes, absolutely. But also session cookies, browser data, payment info, everything they can get their digital hands on. They are a primary vector for setting up bigger attacks like ransomware or just straight-up account takeovers. Think of them as the digital spies that open the door for the big heist.
So an infostealer sneaking through could be the first step to a much larger nightmare. And they're bypassing the EDRs that are supposed to catch them. How are they doing that?
Here's the thing about modern malware, especially infostealers. They are built to evade detection. They use techniques like memory-only execution, which means they run in your computer's RAM and never touch the hard drive. So traditional scanning tools that look at files on disk miss them completely. They also use polymorphism, changing their code every time to look different to signature-based antivirus.
Memory only. Polymorphism. That sounds like they're specifically designed to be invisible to these security tools.
They are. It's an arms race, right? The security tools get better, and the malware writers get more sophisticated in bypassing them. It's a constant push and pull.
And this study also mentions how they're targeting newer things, like password managers and AI tools.
Oh, you saw that? Yeah, that stat was pretty striking. Enterprises saw a 48% increase in thieves targeting password managers and AI platforms just last year. Over 895,000 enterprise AI logins were exposed. Think about the kind of data and access those logins could unlock. The sensitive customer data, proprietary algorithms, internal communications. It's a treasure trove for attackers.
Wow. My mind is officially taking note of that stat. Because it's not just personal accounts, it's corporate networks, sensitive company data. The trust we put in those tools.
Exactly. And this is where the research points to the need for something beyond just endpoint detection. These infostealers are getting the data whether the EDR catches them or not. And that data is ending up on the dark web. Companies need visibility into that asterisk layer as well. It's not enough to trust that your door is locked. You need to see if someone is selling your keys and house plans online.
So it's not enough to just block at the door. You need to also know if your information has already been taken and is being traded on the dark web.
Yes. That's where holistic identity matching comes in. It's like monitoring the fence outside your house after the burglar got past your alarm. It correlates stolen credentials, cookies, session tokens from breaches, and darknet markets to see if your company's or your employees' info is out there. This reportedly shows an attack surface 12 times larger than just looking at typical internal alerts. Think of all the potential entry points that are invisible if you're only looking at your internal network.
A 12 times larger attack surface? Because it's showing you the exposures that happened without you even knowing it from the endpoint tools?
Precisely. And that intelligence from the dark web can then be used times improve the endpoint security. SpyCloud, for example, has integrations with EDRs like CrowdStrike and Microsoft Defender, so they can feed that dark web intelligence back into the EDR saying, hey, this device is likely infected because we found its cookies for this site on the dark web. Even if the EDR didn't see the malware initially, it's about closing the loop.
Okay, so it's about adding that layer of knowing when data has been compromised, even if you didn't see how, and then using that knowledge to go back and find the infected devices. A more proactive way of thinking about it.
Absolutely. It's post-infection remediation driven by pre-breach intelligence, in a way. Knowing that an infostealer likely got on a machine, even if the EDR missed it, gives you the signal to isolate that device and reset those compromised credentials immediately. It's like getting a tip-off that your keys were copied, even if you aren't sure when the burglar got in, so you change the locks right away and check all the windows.
Okay, that makes sense. But playing devil's advocate for a second, Mark. Aren't some security experts saying that focusing too much on cleaning up times after times the fact, like monitoring the dark web, can drain resources? That maybe companies should double down on preventing the intrusion in the first place with things like behavioral analysis or zero trust?
That's a fair point, Jenny, and it's a debate certainly happening in the industry. Some argue that constantly chasing stolen data can lead to analyst fatigue and take away from focusing on real-time threats. And there's a valid point there. You want to stop the burglar at the front door if you can. You don't want to be spending all your time chasing shadows. Plus, sorting through massive volumes of breach data can be overwhelming. An IDC study even pointed out that overloaded security teams are less effective at stopping attacks because of all the alerts they have to deal with.
Right, it's like alert overload. But then the data from SpyCloud is suggesting the prevention methods aren't catching everything anyway. So ignoring the post-breach intelligence seems risky too?
Exactly. It's about finding the right balance, isn't it? And the data suggests the scale of missed infostealers is significant enough that ignoring it feels negligent. You can't rely solely on stopping the initial infection when 2/3 are getting through. It's not either or. It's about adding layers.
Layers. And this also brings up another point. Quote, just because an endpoint missed an infostealer, does that automatically mean it caused a major breach or got sensitive data? Maybe other layers of security caught it. Or the malware malfunctioned. Or the machine just didn't have anything valuable on it anyway, especially for smaller businesses?
That's also true, and it adds nuance. The 2/3 missed stat is alarming, but it doesn't automatically translate to 2/3 successfully breached. Some infostealers might be caught by network monitoring, or user behavior analytics could flag suspicious activity. And you're right, a simple workstation in an SMB might not have the same high-value credentials as a server administrator's machine in a Fortune 500 company. So the impact of a missed infostealer can vary. The context is key.
Okay, so the 66% is a strong indicator of a problem with times endpoint detection, but not necessarily a direct measure of asterisk breach success. That's an important distinction.
Precisely. It highlights a vulnerability in our primary defense layer, which still needs to be addressed. But it doesn't mean every single missed infostealer leads to financial ruin, though it certainly increases the risk times of it. And another potential downside to this constant monitoring and credential resetting. Resetting passwords for users after every shadow breach could become disruptive, couldn't it? Like, oh great, another password reset email. And what about privacy concerns with gathering all this employee data from external sources?
Ugh, yes. The constant password resets are already a pain point for users. And you're right, depending on where the company is located and what data they're correlating, there could be significant privacy issues. Consent and data handling become crucial considerations.
Absolutely. It brings up complex PII, personally identifiable information, handling challenges. So while the holistic identity matching is a valuable layer, it's not without its operational and ethical considerations. It requires careful implementation and clear policies.
So the big takeaway here is, while EDR and antivirus are essential, they are not enough on their own. We need to be considering what happens when malware times get through, because, statistically, it's happening more often than we think. But we also need to be mindful of the potential downsides and complexities of adding those extra layers.
Yes. The 66% is hard to ignore, but understanding the nuances is crucial. It highlights that the endpoint isn't the only place to focus detection efforts. But it doesn't mean we should abandon endpoint security either. Monitoring the fallout on the dark web and using that intelligence to close the loop is becoming essential. But doing so responsibly and efficiently is the challenge.
Fascinating and a little scary, but also something to think about in a nuanced way. It definitely makes you rethink relying on a single layer of defense. Thanks for breaking that down, Mark.
Anytime, Jenny. It's a constantly evolving landscape, and staying on top of how these threats are adapting is key. It makes you wonder. Like, if an employee's password turns up for sale online before times they even realize it's stolen, what's the best course of action? Is it always a full password reset? Or are there alternatives? That's something for our listeners to ponder.
That's a really good question. What would you do in that situation? Let us know. You can find us on social media, reach out via email, or even leave a voicemail. We'd love to hear your real-world experiences and perspectives on this. Also makes you think. Would switching off all those confusing legacy systems and just going cloud-only actually make enterprises more secure? A debate for another day, perhaps? Or maybe you have thoughts on that too?
Excellent points, Jenny. We want to hear from you all. Let's keep the conversation going. And maybe don't reuse passwords? Ever? Seriously.
Point taken. All right, everyone. That's it for this episode of Human-Centered Technology. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and maybe double-check those security logs. And for bonus points, try our quick security quiz on our website. See how you score?
See ya!